Good morning, ninth grade. Here comes the slideshow for the next section. So this is for Tuesday morning. The culture we're looking at is called the Mesopotamian culture. Meso meaning between, and Potamia means between. It ends up meaning between two rivers. It's the area that is now where Iraq and Iran are in the Middle East. So there's quite a lot of artwork I want to show you with this particular slideshow. Don't worry if it seems like too many. There's a lot to look at, and I'd like you to, I'll tell you as much as I can, and then you choose the things you'd like to sketch and as you go through. Okay. Here is the map that gives you an idea of where the culture we're looking at, which is down here. Sumer, also known as Sumeria. Babylon, you may recognize. This is the area why it is called Mesopotamia, because it's the land between these two rivers, the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. Like all of the cultures, the civilizations of this time, they all happened in fertile river floodplains. So what we saw in India, the Indus Valley, the culture there was on the floodplain of that river. We're looking at this one now, and then we will soon look at this one in Egypt of the floodplain of the Nile. So this is an important feature that in order to create civilization, there had to be very fertile land that could grow crops, lots of crops, support a lot of people, as I mentioned to you for the culture that we looked at before. Just so you know where we are, here is Crete that we looked at, the ancient Minoan culture over here, which was a civilization which didn't take place in a river valley, but took place in a very fertile area of the sea. Here is an artist's impression of the city of this ancient Sumerian culture. And one of the defining features of this culture is that they used clay bricks. They made clay bricks. They weren't fired, they were unfired, they're like mud bricks. And they built these cities out of these mud bricks. And you can see there's a city on the outside, more of the domestic houses. And then you can see something like the royal city and the temple. So this temple form, it's a kind of a pyramid and is known as a ziggurat, spelled with a Z, Z-I-G-G-U-R, ziggurat, R-A-T. I can make sure you've got the spelling for that. And this is a temple made up of these layers which go up higher and higher into the sky. And there's a staircase leading up, another staircase leading up there. So we'll come back to this. We'll go into more depth about these people. But from this impression already you can see that they live on this very open plain. It's a lot of water. It's a floodplain. They dig irrigation canals to channel the water and make the land very fertile. They build out of clay bricks, and they build these huge walls. And when they come to build a temple, this is the sacred architecture. The temple architecture is this ziggurat. You may think it has something similar to the pyramids that you see in Central America, in Mexico, for example, with the kind of a pyramid that goes up in steps. The intention of the pyramid, of the ziggurat, is to get up higher and higher in closer to the sky. So the gods of these people, of the Sumerian people, are largely sky gods. And so they make their temple so that that it reaches up into the sky so they can be nearer to their gods. This is the ruins of a real ziggurat. You can see all of the bricks. Here is a man sitting to give you a sense of how large it was. You can see there's all this brickwork, and inside is earth or rubble, and this would have gone on and up further and further, higher and higher into the sky. This is from 2700 BC, so even though it's a ruin, these clay bricks have lasted a very long time. This slide gives you an impression also with the man coming down the steps. You get an impression of how steep the steps are. But I'd also like you to notice that even though they are made up of many, many layers of bricks, that the people are able to create very straight lines. And if we look at this slide, you can get an impression of what it was like to go up this temple. So this is really a kind of, in a sort of poetic way, we can say this is a stairway to the heavens. You can see how steep it is and how it leads up into the sky. To walk up into these pyramids is not, it doesn't feel very comfortable. They're very steep, and you feel quite exposed. It feels you could feel you could fall off very easily. So it's a dramatic place, a temple that takes you up into the height of the temple, a place to be close, near to the gods of the sun and the sky and the moon and the stars. This slide is a good slide because it has some sunlight shining down, so it gives this impression of the sun, the rays of the sun, which are also coming in straight lines. And then I'd like to tell you that when you're doing architecture on this scale, you can't get a straight line with a piece of string. It's too long, the string stretches and sags. And so to get straight lines, these people on a stairway like this, they would actually use shadows. So they would place this pole with the sun shining on it, and the shadow would come down here, and they could day by day follow the line of the shadow. So that was something very important in this large scale architecture, to create things that were based on the straight line. That where could they find the straight line? How could they make something straight? And they got that from the sun and from the shadows the sun makes. Here is some mosaics. It's a particular kind of mosaic where they've made these colored clay. They're like cones. They're round and they're pressed in to the mud of the building. And they can do that with these different colors so that it creates, of course, the color, but also geometrical patterns. So you can see the zigzag pattern there. This one is a little fainter, and here another kind of zigzag, large scale. So you can get an idea of the size of the steps. So these columns covered in these beautiful colors that they could get from the clay. Now here is a sculpture from that time period, and let's just take a few moments with this sculpture to look at it and observe that. Straight away you'll notice that it has some things which are rather strange to our eyes, especially its eyes. If you look here at the top of the face, see how huge the eyes are. And then we get a impression of the nose, very pointy. The arms here, the shoulders very, very strong, but then the shoulders taper down until you get thinner and thinner arms and very tiny hands and fingers. Inside the hands, he's holding a vessel. It's a bit chipped and broken, but he's holding a kind of a cup. And for these people, the water was something very important. All of their life their ability to grow crops, the fertility of the land comes from the water of the rivers. So there's something about this figure here holding a cup of water. We can see many figures like this. They're always holding a cup of water. That somehow their prayer is towards gods of the water or gods of fertility. It's such an interesting figure. We can see the very narrow waist, the strong, thick kind of cloak he's wearing, and then look at his very, very strong and thick legs. So such a contrast between these massive feet, earthy feet, and delicate little hands, gigantic eyes. So there's something, we'll see another one. Let's have a look. Oh, here's a closer up of this character. You can see the cup, you can see the tiny fingers and hands, tiny mouth, huge nose, and then these absolutely unrealistic, huge eyes. So the figure is carved from stone, from alabaster. The beard has been colored, and the eyes have been also colored. The inside with black. So in this part of the world they have oil, as we know, and that as it comes out of the ground naturally, that comes out as like tar, bitumen, and that's what they use to color, make the black and the black eyes. Let's have a look. Here is a female figure. Maybe even more contrast. Look at how tiny her hands are. The little cup is missing, it's been broken away. She also has these gigantic feet. There's her dress, large shoulders, but just watch how tiny it gets. So there's something, the people are expressing something here. It's we always have to look at the artwork and wonder, what are they showing us? Why did they think this was nice? Why did they think this was a kind of beautiful? That it was good to have such strong feet and stand on the earth so securely and strongly. These people are farmers. They work the earth. But then they also value this delicate, look how tiny that one is. Very, very tiny, delicate little hands. Somehow it shows something, how they valued the hand, the human hand, as something very fine and sensitive, and that the hand becomes very delicate when it holds this cup full of this beautiful, precious water. Again, the gigantic eyes. We can assume that these figures are what are known as votive, V-O-T-I-V-E, votive figures. That means a figure that you place somewhere in a temple that is making a prayer. It is kind of, as a sculpture, it's praying for you. You make the sculpture, you put it there, it makes a little prayer for you. If you go into a church or a temple today, you can place a votive candle. So you light a candle and you place it there, and it sends something, it sends a message out. So that idea of a votive figure, you carve it and place it in the temple, and it makes this prayer ongoing on your behalf. This slide's a little blurry, but what it does, it shows us that this kind of figure was very common. There's lots and lots of these. They're similar in some way to those figures we saw, the goddess figures of the Cycladic period, if you can remember that. There's something about these figures that is partly figure, partly geometry. And I'd like to show you this a little bit, the geometry, and I'd encourage you to do a sketch of one of these, and then on top of the sketch to make the geometry more clear. So for example, if you look here, there is a kind of a triangle of his hands, arms going upwards. Can you see that? If I continue that line, that triangle points upwards. Then we can see another triangle coming down here of his chest, pointing downwards. There's another triangle here, pointing upwards with outside arms. Another triangle of his outfit, his skirt. Another triangle coming down now from the beard. And another triangle is not so strong on this one of the hair coming out this way. So if you would do a sketch of one of these, this you can see on all of this, there's something very important about these triangles going up and triangles coming down. Okay, so we go on to a different theme. Let me go backwards for a minute. I want to check. That one's not very clear. But this one you can maybe look more closely for these triangles. Look at the triangle here, the triangle of the legs, triangle of the waist, triangle of the beard. So that everything is triangles, either pointing upwards or pointing downwards. And in the middle of all these triangles is this cup. So this cup of precious life-giving water is in between all these things that come up from the earth and down from the sky. These next sculptures I'm going to show you explore this theme of below and above. So it's kind of clear in this one with it looks like a parent, a father or mother sitting, and a child standing up, reaching up into the sky. Looks like holding a bird, kind of an eagle or hawk that's tethered. But this idea of things below going up and going up into the sky, we're going to see that a few times. This is a very interesting and strange sculpture. It's called the Eye Goddess, or Eye Idol, an idol about the eyes. So you see this pair of eyes carved down here, this other pair of eyes up here. And we saw this importance of the eyes on those other figures, their gigantic eyes. So there's something about these people that are just really fascinated by the eye and seeing. This is a small figure. It's not bronze, it's actually copper. It's a figure that they call a foundation figure. So it's something you would make or have someone make for you, and you would put it in the ground under the foundations of your house or the foundations of a temple. And I think it's very interesting to note that it has this writing on it down here in the bottom. The legs are very simplified, so you would stick that in the ground, and then it has this gesture of holding something up above its head, like a foundation holding up a building. So again, there are hundreds of these that have been found, so we know this is a typical thing that they made. And this is a relief sculpture. That means it's flat. It's been carved onto a flat piece of stone, and it's quite ruined. There's bits missing, but what I wanted to show you was the importance for these people of the idea of different layers. There's a layer here, there's another layer here. You need a ladder to get up to this layer, and then another layer, and then finally a layer at the top. And we don't know what was down here. It's so ruined. But here we see lots of, on both sides, going this way and going this way, we see people approaching either a king seated on his throne or a god. And then when we come up to here, to this upper layer, we see a much bigger figure. If you look closely, you can see the ruins, the remains of another figure that was seated here. There's the head, there's the legs, and this one is making a prayer to this figure. And right there at the top is this symbol, the moon symbol, and this symbol of a star up above. So there's something very conscious being worked out with these people of the different layers, what's below, and the stages and steps to get up into the sky where the gods live. It's the same idea as we see in their temple, in their ziggurat, going up into the sky. to meet the gods. Here is another one, a stone carving, and just to see this idea of layers again. Down here is something, some kind of a monster. It's like a snake with some sort of a horned head, scorpion. And we come up through some other layers, animals, some statues, a sphinx, another sphinx. And you come up to the very top. It's like a goat figure, and then these symbols of the moon, and this one, the 8-pointed star, represents Ishtar. Another another 8-pointed star there, Ishtar. So it could well be at the top here is the temple for Ishtar, one of their gods. This is a very interesting vase carved from stone, and it shows this same idea, this vertical layering. At the bottom you find plant forms, some grains. And the second layer you find animals. The third layer you find human beings carrying things. And you go to the top and then you find these shapes. And around here, these people worshipping, bringing things up to the god. So this idea from the earth going up into the heavens up above is something that these people it was really part of their understanding of how the world was built. We go down to the plants, looks here like water, earth, plants, animals, people, gods at the top. Here is a very important stone carving, Hammurabi, important king. Here is all writing his laws on this stone, and this is an image of him making very interesting shape with his hands, some geometrical shape, and he's receiving the insignia, the thing that makes him able to be the king, from the god Shamash, sitting on this throne up in the heavens. So such a simple shape, but the idea of the king meeting the god and receiving his authority to be the king at the top of the sculpture. So I'm just repeating the same thing, that these people had this idea. You have to go up into the sky, and there you will meet the god, and from there will come the authority. I just want to compare something and add a little note to this. Probably all of you know the story of Moses receiving the 10 Commandments. And where did he receive the 10 Commandments? He went up to the top of the mountain. He met the God at the top of the mountain, and there he got his instructions and brought the laws down to the people. So a different culture nearby in the Middle East, we don't see sculptures from the Hebrew people, but here we have something very similar, a similar idea, the laws written in stone. This is Hammurabi, it's not Moses, but he goes up to the top of this mountain to meet the god. There's a closer up picture of him. You can see more detail of the writing here. We'll talk about writing a bit more in a moment. I'm very intrigued by his gesture, the way these arms are folded to come to the god in a respectful way. So if we move on and the sculptures become more modern, not so primitive, we can see the same idea, clasping the hands, holding this cup, but now everything is much more realistic. The eyes are closer to normal size. They're still pretty big, gazing off into the distance, up into the sky. And now they've used lapis lazuli, this beautiful blue stone, to show the iris. and they've used the bitumen black to outline the eye. We can see he had a beard, this man, but he also had a shaved head, which may have been a tradition in that time. This one shows more of the whole sculpture. This part was missing, been broken away, his legs and feet are missing, and that block is just a reconstruction from the museum, so that's not original. But you see him sitting on something, it looks like a woven seat. You see his interesting clothing, looks like feathers or some woven plant material. And then this very beautiful calm gesture, holding the hands together in the chest, center of the chest, and then this beautiful eyes looking up into the sky. So we have a representation. This sculpture helps us to feel more closely what those people felt like. The other ones are a little primitive. We can't really connect to them so easily. But this one, because it's more realistic, we can enter into it. We can see something about what these people really valued. This centeredness, holding this precious thing close to their heart, being calm, being serene, and being open. These open eyes, this openness to see into the sky, to see into the world of the gods. But I also think with this gesture of the eyes, they're so open, it's as if they have nothing to hide, and the gods can see into them, into their heart or into their conscience. This is a female figure from that same period, a different stone, a dark stone, but we see her holding her hands. In this case, I think there is not, it's broken, it's hard to tell, but it looks like the way her hands are clasped, there isn't a water vessel there. More realistic with the shaping of the cloth, some of the detail of the cloth. So, it's carved in stone. Looks like she has some jewelry around her neck, the way her hairstyle is done. So we do have a chance to see something of these people, of how they like to dress, how they like to present themselves, how they like to stand in the world, upright and noble. This thing I'm showing you is called the Standard of Ur, U-R, and that is the name of one of the cities of this time period. And a standard is something, it's like a flag, you carry it, the people would carry it through the city. It's a symbol, it has these pictures on it, and it has two sides to it. This side is a symbol, an image of peace. The people are sitting, they're drinking, they're looking after their animals, they're doing their work. And the other side, it's a jump, sorry, this is in a museum, is a symbol of war. And there you see, look at their chariots, their horses, the soldiers in the back of the chariots, soldiers going to war. Up here, you'll see this person is larger. It looks like they are bringing the people that they have captured to see the king. So this one piece of work is made from wood with mosaic, stone mosaic glued onto the surface. It's called a standard. They would carry it through the streets. And no doubt that depending on which side they presented was a message to the people what was about to happen. It's well known that there was lots of wars during this time. This strong culture, this strong city culture, also to protect their land and to protect their culture, to protect their farming, they would sometimes have to go to war against the nearby tribes. Here's a little detail from one side. It shows a harp. And look at this harp. It has a carving of a bull on it there. Quite often you will see these people are bald, like that one man we saw It looks like these ones, bald or shaven head, I meant to say. So these ones have hair. And on the other side we see the chariot. Look at the wheels and the way the wheels are made. So we do actually get some, here are the spears. We do actually get some technical information even from these artworks. You could try to figure out how many horses there are. You try and count, oh yeah, you can count the heads. 1, 2, 3, 4 horses pulling this chariot. This is a very strange thing. Some people think it looks like a something to wind up the horse. I don't know what that is. It's not for winding up the horse though. This is in the museum in London, and here you see a real example. We saw a picture of that harp with the bull's head, and here's a real one that was made. And there's another one here, 2 harps in this collection of things from ancient Mesopotamia. That's in London in the British Museum. Here's a detail of the head of that bull, which was part of the harp. You can see it's formed and then covered with precious things, covered with gold, covered with this bronze, metal, the eyes of lapis lazuli, the mosaic over here where the image is also a mosaic made up of precious stones. And here's another image made up of a mosaic of white stone and the blue stone, of this figure wrestling with these 2 animals, where he has his hands around them. Maybe not wrestling, maybe they're friends. But the animals also have very human faces. You can see that he has his hands holding them, and they have their hooves up in the air. So this is a very common image from this time period, from these people, of a man, a human being, interacting or overcoming interesting animals. As I say, these ones have very human kind of faces. They're kind of a sphinx in that way. The faces of the animals are almost the same as the face of the human being. Same museum in London. Here is a ram standing up in a caught. It's called a ram in a thicket. A ram caught in a bush. Again, made up of something wood underneath, covered in gold, and then covered in all these precious stones as well. A flower here at the end. So you can notice a certain style of the mosaic and the gold. So you see the standard of Ur there, and you see this ram, and you saw the lyres, the harps, with that same artistic style. Here's a stone carving, and I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. One thing is the size of the people. So the sizes are not realistic. When a carving of someone is small, it means they are less important. When the person is made bigger, they are more important. So you can see these 2 people, this one here that these people are coming towards is more important. This man here is more important. I'd also like to draw your attention to all of the hand gestures. This repeated clasping hands. This person is holding a jug or something. Down here again, all of this clasping, and this one is even having his hands crossed. So there's something very interesting in there. This gesture, we see this gesture over and over again, this holding the hands to the chest. And then the other thing I want to draw your attention to is to all of the early writing, all these symbols, shapes. In between the figures are carved, and even on the figures, all these letters, all these shapes. So I'm going to look at that a bit more. I bet you can't guess what this is. You can look at the inscription, the words down the bottom. This is a little piece of stone. It's carved with all these things on it. It's called a cylinder seal. So what you do, you take this thing and you roll it out onto a piece of clay, and it makes a stamp, it makes an impression. I'll show you some more. So here is a cylinder seal. This is the seal. You can see it's carved out in negative. It's a human figure there holding these branches. This is a little ram on top. But when you roll this thing and you press it onto a piece of clay and roll it out, then it rolls out this sequence of figures. Here is this man with the branches. That's him there. So all these other shapes are around the other side. So it will start on the back over here, and this will be in the middle, and it will do the same again. So this is called a cylinder seal. It's the same as I mentioned yesterday with the Harappan culture of a stamp, but now this time it's round and they roll it out. It's a long piece of clay and they roll it out. And I'd like to tell you again, just to emphasize this, there's certain kind of capacity to carve something, to hollow it out. This is the thing you make. You carve this out of stone, knowing that when you roll it out, what's negative here, what's carved away, is going to come forward. It's going to come out over here. It shows a certain kind of thinking and a capacity to imagine something. And then also this kind of, it's a kind of, they make something here, they make it once, and then you can make thousands of these things. So like I said yesterday with the stamps, this is a way for someone to give a stamp to say this clay tablet comes from this person. Here's another one. It's carved out of stone, carved in the negative, and when you roll it out, this is the figure. These are the figures that you get. This one shows an upper and lower scene. It's kind of a banquet or drinking or eating scene. There's some of these letters, the first beginning of alphabet coming here. So again, it's in the round. You carve these things and then you press it on clay and roll it out. I think it's really important to know, both with the Harappan culture and with this culture, that their writing, their stamps, were not for printing, they were for stamping. So the beginning of writing is done with something solid, with clay. It's stamped into clay. They don't have ink, they don't have pens. The writing is something that gets impressed in the first place into clay. I want to show you at least a couple of examples of pottery. All over the world, people learned how to make pots. They learned how to fire them, to take the clay and transform it into something very useful. There's a beautiful shape here. This is a fragment of another pot, very ancient, 4000 BC apparently, and it shows a beautiful coloring and such a nice, very free impression of a deer or a ram, something with these gigantic horns. So nice to see that. It's very free the way they've rendered it. Could be modern. Now here is a little clay tablet, and we're going to go a little bit more into the beginning of writing. So we saw those things, the stamps and the impressions that the Harappan people made there in the Indus Valley. And something, we saw the cylinder seals just now, and then another thing happens here with the people of Mesopotamia where they start writing with these shapes directly into clay. So they make a little clay pad, a little square, a slab, and then they take a stick and they start drawing things in it. You can see that has something to do with a hand. This has something to do with a plant forms. This looks like something like a vessel that holds something. This could be a farming implement. all kinds of shapes. But what I wanted to, there's the shapes themselves as the beginning of letters, but then I want you to see how they've divided the page. If we call this a page, they've divided, there's a lower part and an upper part, and then they've divided the upper part into 4 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a little bit, they're starting to organize. This tells one thing, and then you go here, this tells another thing. So something happens, they start organizing the space of the page, if I can call this a page for a moment. And it's something that goes from left to right. If you think about those cylinder seals, how they roll out horizontally. So there's something happening with this beginning of writing that also someone had the idea, let's start on the left and go to the right. Let's roll that thing out that way. And this little piece of clay shows something, oh, let's organize the space. It goes from here to here to here. And there's this underlying theme down here. This changes and develops. It starts to get very, very complicated to this kind of writing. It's called cuneiform writing that these people invented. And just to emphasize that writing, when writing began, it began with sculpting. It's either carving in stone or pressing into clay. And it eventually turns into this very, very complicated, very fine, very detailed script, cuneiform script. Here is a diagram that scholars have put together to show how the writing from these people, from Mesopotamia, how the writing developed. So this is such an interesting to watch how this happens. You can see 3,200, 3,000, 2,400, 1,000 BC. So over 2,200 years, such a long time to imagine how writing slowly changed. You can see it starts off very figurative, a head, a foot, barley. Not sure why that's bread, water, that's easy. Day, looks like a sunrise. A bird, those things are easy to understand, relatively easy. And then it's interesting to watch why they put the head horizontal, the foot horizontal. That also turned. Almost everything turned at some point. And then it became, excuse me, and then it became more and more abstract until it became these little marks that they could just press into the clay. It's still based on an image. You can see a leg and a foot, and you can still find a leg and a foot here. Not so easy to find a head there. Hand, water. But this process of abstracting, this is a remarkable process that took place all over the world, this creation of writing. And not everywhere in the world can we find a record of this process, going from a picture to a script. That's a really important thing that took place in this time period. Let me see what I've got next. We're back to the beginning. So there's a lot of images this time, a lot of artworks for you to look at. Please don't stress out about having to draw or do all of them. If you could please make a sketch of ziggurat, the architecture, the figures that are holding their hands in this gesture and looking up to the sky, one of those figures. It would be really great if you would do that geometrical experiment I mentioned. Draw one of those figures and then extend the line so you can see these triangles as they go out from the figure. I'm just looking at a review of the slides here. I'm going to find you the description of that, the code of Hammurabi, that you have this interesting law written down, that was written down, one of the first kind of laws of how people should behave. I'm just looking at the slides to see. It would be good if you would do something with the script, the cuneiform script. You could copy a few of those, the letters from their alphabet, just so you see, you write something down, a little bit of the pottery, beautiful piece of pottery. So you don't need to do too many things. As I say, I will get that code of Hammurabi for you, so you can also include that, this direct writing, directly from the people, what they thought. And then there's also these interesting ones, the simple figures, the one, the eye god or eye goddess there is quite a beautiful thing. And the little copper figure, the foundation figure. In your notes, just make sure you please capture something of this thing I've repeated a few times, that these people have such an interest in dividing the world from what's below and what's above, from the earth and these layers going up into the sky to the heavens. It's something that they really specially developed. When you look at the architecture and you see this stairway, it reminds me, again, what we get from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew people in words. From the Hebrew people, we have it written down in their stories, this stairway to heaven that they mention. And so we don't have these words from the Sumerian people, but we have the architecture. The last thing I want to say, and I'll see if I can find you an excerpt that you can read that and include that in the portal, is about Gilgamesh. So the Epic of Gilgamesh, you may have heard about this. It comes from this time and it comes from these people. And the story tells some very interesting details. Gilgamesh himself is this strange man who is so many parts human and so many parts God. He has this half God, half man, and then all his adventures and what he goes through. So if you haven't dealt with that, if you haven't come across that story earlier in your education, it'd be a good moment to read it, because it's absolutely connected to this time period and these people. And the only reason we have that story today is because it was found on these clay tablets written down. And scholars have been piecing this story together for 100 years. A fragment of a clay tablet here and a fragment from there, and they've been putting this story together and keep adding different parts of it. So that's it for today. Okay, bye.